Wait a little bit for people to find it. Sometimes technology is the worst. I mean, it's good, but it's the worst sometimes. Okay. Well, just a little bit longer. I don't know why it does that. Why it just gives out. Um. Okay, we're gonna try again. Okay, so Reepicheep was injured, and Lucy was able to heal him with her magic cordial, right? But there was one thing that wasn't there, and it was his tail, right? And he talked a lot about his honor and how a mouse's tail was his honor, how it was so important to him. So let's see what happens next. Hail, Aslan, came his shrill voice. I have the honor. But then he suddenly stopped. The fact was that he still had no tail. Whether that Lucy had forgotten it, or that her cordial, though it could heal wounds, could not make things grow again. Reepicheep became aware of his loss as he made his bow. Perhaps it altered something in his balance. He looked over his right shoulder. Failing to see his tail, he strained his neck further till he had to turn his shoulders and his whole body followed. But by that time, his hindquarters had turned to and were out of sight. Then he strained his neck, looking over his shoulder again, with the same result. Only after he had turned completely around 3 times did he realize the dreadful truth. I am confounded, said Reepicheep to Aslan. I am completely out of countenance. I must crave your indulgence for appearing in this unseemly fashion. It becomes you very well, small one, said Aslan. All the same, replied Reepicheep, if anything could be done, perhaps Her Majesty, and here he bowed to Lucy. But what would you want with a tail? Asked Aslan. Sir, said the mouse, I can eat and sleep and die for my king without one, but a tail is the honor and glory of a mouse. I have sometimes wondered, friend, said Aslan, whether you do not think too much about your honor. Highest of all high kings, said Reepicheep, permit me to remind you that a very small size has been bestowed on us mice, and if we did not guard our dignity, some, who weigh worth by inches, would allow themselves very unsuitable pleasantries at our expense. That is why I have been at some pains to make it known that no one who does not wish to feel this sword as near his heart as I shall reach shall talk in my presence about traps or toasted cheese or candles. No, sir, not the tallest fool in Narnia. Here, he glared up very fiercely at Wimbleweather. But the giant, who was always a stage behind everyone else, had not yet discovered what was being talked about down at his feet. So he missed the point. Why have your followers all drawn their swords, may I said Aslan. May it please your high majesty, said the second mouse, whose name was Peepakeek. We are all waiting to cut off our own tails if our chief must go out without his. We will not bear the shame of wearing an honor which is denied to the high mouse. Ah, roared Aslan, you have conquered me. You have great hearts, not for the sake of your dignity, Reepicheep, but for the love that is between you and your people, and still more for the kindness your people showed me long ago when you ate away the cords that bound me on the stone table. And it was then, though you have long forgotten it, that you began to be talking mice. You shall have your tail again. Before Aslan had finished speaking, the new tail was in its place. And at Aslan's command, Peter bestowed the knighthood of the Order of the Lion on Caspian. And Caspian, as soon as he was knighted, himself bestowed it on Truffle Hunter and Trumpkin and Reepicheep, and made Dr. Cornelius his Lord Chancellor, and confirmed the Bulgy Bear as his hereditary office of Marshal of the Lists. And there was a great applause all around. After this, The Talmud soldiers, firmly but without taunts or blows, were taken across the ford and all put under lock and key in the town of Baruna and gave beef and drink. They made a great fuss about wading in the water, but they all hated and feared running water just as much as they hated and feared the woods and animals. But in the end, the nuisance was over. Then the nicest parts of that day began. Lucy, sitting close to Aslan and divinely comfortable, wondered what the trees were doing. At first, she thought they were merely dancing. They were certainly going round slowly in two circles, one from the left to right and the other from the right to the left. Then she noticed that they kept throwing something down the center of both circles. Sometimes she thought they were cutting off long strands of their hair, and other times it looked as if they were breaking off bits of their fingers. But if so, they had plenty of fingers to spare and it did not hurt them. But whatever they were throwing down, when it reached the ground, it became brushwood or dry sticks. Then three or four of the red dwarfs came forward with their tinder boxes and set light to the pile, which first crackled and then blazed, and finally roared as a woodland bonfire on a midsummer night ought to do. And everyone sat down in a wide circle around it. Then Bacchus and Silenus and the Maenads began a dance far wilder than the dance of the trees, not merely a dance for fun and beauty, though it was that too, but a magic dance of plenty. And where their hands touched and where their feet fell, the feast came into existence. Sides of roasted meat that filled the grove with a delicious smell, and wheaten cakes and oaten cakes, and honey and many colored sugars, and cream as thick as porridge and as smooth as still water, peaches and nectarines, pomegranates, pears, grapes, strawberries, raspberries, pyramids, and cataracts of fruit. Then, in great wooden cups and bowls and mazers, wreathed with ivy, came the wines, dark, thick ones of syrup and mulberry juice, and clear red ones like jellies liquefied, and yellow wines and green wines, and yellow green and greenish yellow. Different kinds. But for the tree people, different fare was provided. When Lucy saw Clodley's shovel and his moles scuffling up the turf in various places, which Bacchus had made up, and realized that the trees were going to eat earth, it gave her rather a shudder. But when she saw the earth that were actually brought to them, she felt quite different. They began with a rich brown loam, and it looked exactly like chocolate. So like chocolate, in fact, that Edmund tried a piece of it, but he did not find it nice at all. When the rich loam had taken the edge off their hunger, the trees turned to an earth of the kind that you see in Somerset, which is almost pink. They said it was lighter and sweeter. At the cheese stage, they had a chalky soil, and then went on to delicate confections of the finest gravels, powdered with choice silver sand. They drank very little wine, and it made the hollies very talkative. For the most part, they quenched their thirst with deep draughts of mingled dew and rain, flavored with forest flowers and the airy taste of the thinnest clouds. Thus, Aslan feasted the Narnians till long after the sunset had died away, and the stars had come out, and the great fire, now hotter but less noisy, shone like a beacon in the dark woods, and the frightened Telmarines saw it from far away and wondered what it might mean. The best thing about this feast was that there was no breaking up or going away, but as the talk grew quieter and slower, one after another would begin to nod off and finally drop off to sleep with feet towards the fire and good friends on either side, till at last there was silence all around the woods, all around the circle, and the chattering of the water over the stone at the fort of Verona could be heard once more. But all night Aslan and the moon gazed up at upon each other with joyful and unblinking eyes. Next day, messengers, who were chiefly squirrels and birds, were sent all over the country with a proclamation to the scattered Telmarines, including, of course, the prisoners in Verona. They were told that Caspian was now king, and that Narnia would henceforth belong to the talking dwarfs and the dryads and the fauns, and all the other creatures quite as much as to the men. Any who chose to stay under the new conditions might do so. But for those who did not like the idea, Aslan would provide another home. Anyone who wished to go must come to Aslan and the kings at the fort of Baruna by noon on the fifth day. You may imagine this caused plenty of head scratching among the Telmarines. Some of them, chiefly the young ones, had, like Caspian, heard the stories of the old days and were delighted that they had come back. They were already making friends with the creatures. These all decided to stay in Narnia. But most of the older men, especially those who had been important under Miraz, were sulky and had no wish to live in a country where they could not rule the roost. Live here with a lot of blooming, performing animals? No fear, they said, and ghosts too, added some with a shudder. That's what they those were. That's what those their dryads really are. It's not canny. They were also suspicious. I don't trust him, they said. Not with that awful lion and all. He won't keep his claws off us long, you'll see. But then they were equally suspicious of his offer to give them a new home. Take us off to his den and eat us one by one, most likely, they muttered. And the more they talked to one another, the sulkier and more suspicious they came. But on the day appointed, more than half of them turned up. At one end of the glade, Aslan had caused to be set up two stakes of wood higher than a man's head and about 3 feet apart. A third and lighter piece of wood was bound across them at the top, uniting them, so that the whole thing looked like a doorway from nowhere into nowhere. In front of this stood Aslan himself, with Peter on his right and Caspian on his left. Grouped around them were Susan and Lucy, Trumpkin and Truffle Hunter, the Lord Cornelius, Glenstorm, Reepicheep, and others. The children and the dwarves had made good use of the royal wardrobes in which had been in the castle of Miraz and was now the castle of Caspian. And what was silk cloth of gold and snowy linen glancing through slashed sleeves, with silver mail shirts and jeweled sword hilts, with gilt helmets and feather bonnets, they were almost too bright to look at. Even the beasts wore rich chains around their necks. Yet nobody's eyes were on them or the children. The living and strokable gold of Aslan's mane outshone each side of the glade. At the far end stood the Telmarines. The sun shone brightly, and pennants fluttered in the light wind. And that. So we're going to stop for today. So I thought we were going to finish today, but actually we're going to finish tomorrow. So we only have a little bit left, but a little bit too long to finish today. So thank you for watching, and I hope that all of you have a great day, and know that you're doing well, and I miss all of you, and we'll see you next time.